Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Please welcome Ron Freed, Board Chair of the Hospice Action Network and Vice Chair of NHPCO.
Good morning and welcome. This might be the last day of our conference, but there is still a lot going on today, and I'm delighted to welcome you this morning and get things started. First, let me ask, were many of you able to attend the National Hospice Foundation's gala yesterday evening? Maybe we can get Don to agree to let us auction pizza with Don later on this afternoon. It was a beautiful event, and for those who joined us, thank you for being part of our celebration of heroines and humanitarians from the field. As you know, the annual NHF Gala raises important dollars that support NHPCO programs and services like our pediatric work, We Honor Veterans, Caring Connections, consumer engagement initiatives, work with FASHA, and more. I want to take a moment to thank the staff who worked so hard to make it such a terrific evening. Let me mention a few conference administrative details that are important. The process for continuing education credit is done and entirely online and is explained in the CE/CME section of your learning journal that begins on page 21. So you're aware, following the conference, all registered attendees will receive an email with a link to both the overall conference evaluation and session attendance evaluation. You can also find the link to the evaluations on the last page of your learning journal. For those needing continuing education credit, you must complete both of the evaluations by Friday, April 20th, 2012. However, we ask that everyone complete the overall conference evaluation, whether you need CEs or not. We look at these evaluations very carefully, and your feedback helps us improve our conferences. After you've completed the evaluations, you will receive instructions on how to print off your CE or CME certificate from the NHPCO website. If you have not paid your CE, CME credit yet, there's an online option available when you're completing the evaluation process. The back page of the Learning Journal also lists the online link for conference handouts, which are available to conference participants for the next 6 months. And remember, you can purchase a zip drive from the marketplace with all the handouts preloaded. Audio recordings of the concurrent sessions are available from digital conference providers. You'll find the DC Providers sales booth outside this room in the Potomac foyer. They'll be happy to download your order audio recordings. If you look at the Notes tab in the Learning Journal, you'll find more information about recordings of concurrent sessions. We've had a lot of questions about the plenary presentations and availability to share those with your teams after the conference. Within the next few weeks, we will have online webcasts of the MLC plenary available through eOnline, NHPCO's professional education site. Only NHPCO members will be able to access these outstanding presentations that many of you have asked about. Now let's move on to this morning's plenary presentation, Appreciative Leadership Building on a Thriving Organization. We are honored to have Dr. Diana Whitney joining us today, the Grande Dame of Appreciative Inquiry, to talk about appreciative leadership. Diana is the founder and president of Corporation for Positive Change, an international consultancy dedicated to the creation of collaborative advantage in business, healthcare, social profit organizations, and religious and interfaith communities. She's an author and editor of 16 books on appreciative inquiry and leadership, including Appreciative Leadership and Appreciative Inquiry in Healthcare, and The Power of Appreciative Inquiry, a Practical Guide to Positive Change. Drawing on her experience and research, Diana will look at leadership as a powerful relational process and offer strategies for extraordinary performance. Please welcome Diana Whitney.
Thank you very much. Good morning. How many dance till midnight? All right. How many dance till 1 o'clock? Yeah, there's a few in the room. Wasn't that fabulous last night? Absolutely phenomenal. I am delighted to be here, and I recognize that each of you has been going for many days in and out of sessions, and then we had the wonderful gala last night. And so it's an opportunity for us to sort of spend some time together, and hopefully you'll find this somewhat integrative, that you'll find some of what I have to say, things that you've heard in other sessions, and you'll find some of the things that I have to say, things that you've been thinking about. So let's get started. Every generation needs a new revolution. Thomas Jefferson. Now, our generation has had our share of revolutions, so to speak. But what I want to suggest is that every organization needs a positive revolution. And so what the focus of this presentation is all about is about the intersection of three emerging fields that have been described as a positive revolution and what those fields have to offer to leadership. First, appreciative inquiry, the work that I'm most known for. Appreciative inquiry is really creating a change in the way we look at human organizing and human change. And what I'm going to do today is talk a little bit about appreciative inquiry and then talk about what we've learned about leadership. The second is positive psychology. How many of you in the room have some familiarity with the new positive psychology movement? Got to get some exercise this morning. Raise those hands. You're right. So there are a number of you. I'm going to touch on positive psychology and what is happening in that field as it is moving back to where it was founded. Psychology was very early founded as the science of the human spirit. There was a curiosity about how to bring more spirit to life in human beings. And it has moved so much into the study of what's wrong with people. And now positive psychology is restoring psychology to its original foundation. And then the strengths movement. Again, how many of you are familiar with the Gallup work and know your own 5 strengths? So we'll talk just a little bit about that movement, which is also changing how we think about human performance and human development. And so what I'm going to be doing is talking about each of these fields and bringing them to life in terms of what leadership is. So let's start with appreciative inquiry. I asked you about strengths movement and positive psychology. How many of you know something about appreciative inquiry? I know there's about 50 or so in the room who joined us in the workshop. Great. So what is appreciative inquiry? I'm going to begin by telling a story. Now, this story comes not from healthcare, not from hospice, but it does come from an area of customer service, and that's the field of auto repair. You know, we've all got cars, we drive, we all take our cars to get repaired. A number of years ago, British Petroleum decided to start a new business in the United States, and it was the automobile repair business. They opened up a number of stations throughout the Midwest of the United States. They operated those organizations for about a year and then decided it was time to do a customer satisfaction survey. They did that and they found that they had a rating of 79% customer satisfaction. And they said, not good enough. You know, we want to improve our customer satisfaction. And so they did what I will call an old paradigm study. And you probably, this is somewhat familiar to you. They gathered focus groups of dissatisfied customers, and they asked them, why are you dissatisfied? What's the problem? What are the kinds of things that make you not come back? What do we have to do to satisfy you? Well, also in keeping with being good managers and leaders, they thought they should share the data. So they took all the information they gathered and they posted it on the walls in every one of their locations. How do you think their employees felt when they came in every morning and what they saw was, here's what customers say causes dissatisfaction? How did that make them feel? Pretty lousy. And what happens when employees feel bad about what they're doing? What happens to quality? It goes down. We know there's a direct correlation between employee satisfaction and quality. And when quality of service goes down, what happens to customer service? So it went down further. The bottom fell out. Their customer satisfaction got worse. All well-intended, just like many of you, I'm sure, are doing things that are well-intended, but they're not making people happy. They're not satisfying customers. They're not improving quality. So as the story goes, the president of this division happened to live next door to a young graduate student who was looking for a place to do his PhD research using Appreciative Inquiry. And they got into a conversation. The president of the company says, we're having a problem. Customer service is bad. I'm losing employees. Morale is down. And he talked about the research they had done. So this graduate student, Chet, says, have you ever done a study of your satisfied customers? And the president says, well, no. Why should we? They're satisfied. Now, the question then is, do you know why your customers are satisfied? Do you know all of the little nuances, the subtleties? Do you know everything that makes them satisfied? And the president said, well, I could guess. So no, he didn't know, but he could guess. And so Chet says to him, well, would you be willing to do an appreciative inquiry? Do a study of all of your customers, satisfied and dissatisfied. Because you see, with appreciative inquiry, we assume that we all have positive experiences someplace along the way. How many of you have had lousy experiences with car repair? And how many of you have had great experiences with car repair, right? We've all had both experiences. And appreciative inquiry says, if you want to learn how to do it better, study the root cause of success. Study those times when things are at their best. So they did that. They went out and they had focus groups with customers. They said, what makes you satisfied? What is it that keeps you coming back? How can we be even better for you? And they did some benchmarking. They went out to other organizations and studied what made great customer service. Now, the interesting thing about that is they shared that information in all of their locations. And now, when customers came to work, they saw, not only did they see what they did well, but they saw what the people in the other state did well. They saw what the other stations did well. And so they got ideas of what else they could do. You see, that's what appreciative inquiry is about, giving us images of positive possibility. Because, you know, we don't come to work trying to make mistakes. We come to work wanting to do well, but we need models of success so that we can replicate it and copy it. And so when people see what works well, they can do it. Now, this is where some of the surprises were. They heard what satisfies customers, the usual. My car is done on time. It's done for the cost that they tell me it will cost. But do you know what some of the surprises were? The quality of coffee in the waiting room. That mattered to customers. Here's another one that'll tickle you. How clean the bathrooms are. Automobile repair. How clean the bathrooms are. So we don't know what satisfies our customers until we talk to them. We don't know what they're hoping and dreaming and wanting and needing until we engage with them. And when we engage with them through questions about what makes their life better, tell us about moments of great success, what we call the root cause of success analysis, we can really learn how to keep growing and improving. And so you'll see this in 8 months, the customer service rating was up to 95%. And so appreciative inquiry is about what? It tells us a few things about leadership. Yes, leadership is about getting results. We're not going to argue that. But it's about how do we get results, and that's performance. What is it that we're doing? How are we doing it? And that has to do with people. How do people relate to each other in order to perform in ways that get results? But more significantly, leadership is about meaning making. Leadership is about the stories we tell. It's about the questions we ask. It's about the conversations that we initiate in our organizations that give meaning and life to the people in our work environment. So here's kind of some ideas about what appreciative inquiry is. First, it's a philosophy. It's a philosophy of human organizing and change that is based on an assumption that human systems, people, organizations, teams, we move, we grow in the direction of what we study. You want to play golf? You study golf. You want to play tennis? You study tennis. You want to know how to grow your organization? Go study other organizations that have grown. You want to learn how to develop more relationships with donors and get bigger donations? Go study the people who are good at it. Find out what they do. Become curious in what works well. Appreciative inquiry is also a process for engaging large numbers of people. In a little while, we'll talk about a couple of examples of bringing hundreds of people together in dialogue, in the same conversation about the organization and about what's possible. I know in your work, voice is important. I know that that's part of what matters to you in the work you deliver to your clients. Voice is important to employees. Voice is important to staff. Voice is important to all of us. So being able to have a process in which you bring diverse people together and hear all voices. My elevator talk about appreciative inquiry. It's the study of what gives life to human systems when they're at their best. It's the study, the curiosity, the inquiry into what gives life, what energizes us, what jazzes us up, what really gets us going when we're at our best. Because we're not all at our best. Anybody here always at your best? Yeah, a few of us on our good days. So appreciative inquiry says, let's look at those times, moments, days, weeks, patterns of behavior when we're at our best. It does not say we are always at our best. So it's not Pollyanna, it's not soft. It doesn't say, oh, la-di-da-di-da, be nice to each other. It says, make a habit of studying what works well, because that is the best way to learn, to grow, and to innovate your organization. Sam Walton was noted for what he said. He would steal shamelessly. He'd go wandering into his customers' stores. He'd bring his competitors together, and they'd meet and they'd talk about what they do. His lawyers didn't like it a lot, but he would bring people together. How do you make sales? How do you build customer loyalty? What kinds of things? Get good ideas from each other and make them your own. That's what appreciative inquiry is all about. Here's just a kind of a long list of where appreciative inquiry has been used. You've got this in your materials. I'm not going to read through it, but you can see that we use it for everything from customer service to strategic planning to staffing to forming and building a global interfaith organization that never existed on the planet and now exists in over 550 locations around the world. So it's a very useful process for a number of important strategic issues. Over 15 years of practicing appreciative inquiry in healthcare, in business, in religious organizations, we began to notice something about the leaders of these kinds of efforts. And I began to sort of say to myself, it seems that there's a new breed of leadership who is looking for a methodology that is value congruent and helps them do what they want to do. You see, the old paradigm leaders, the other generations of leaders, maybe they were trained in the military, and now we have people trained in the university. There's just a little bit of difference. I know my son, when he was in law school, he said to me, Mom, we're having study groups, we've got this project together, we're all working together. From my orientation, I said, that's cheating. When I went to school, you did it yourself. Nobody helped each other. And so we're now in a world where collaboration is the norm, where leadership needs to learn to work and help people be collaborative and co-create the future. So we've started to watch the leaders that we've worked with, and we notice 4 things. The first is that leaders are willing to engage with people. And the key word there is with. You know, we've got a great example in our midst, Don, who sold himself last night at the auction. And he's going to go out into the field and be with a number of the different hospice organizations. It's a great example of leaders who are willing to not just be the one who stands up and tells you what to do, but is willing to be there with you, co-creating the future. The second is that these leaders truly enjoy learning and change. We had one executive, Rick Pellet, who runs an organization called Hunter Douglas Window Fashions. You may have some of their window curtains around your house or your office. And Rick said after the first year of doing Appreciative Inquiry, he said, you know, I really thought Appreciative Inquiry was going to be good for my organization. He said, and you know, I have staff members, I wanted them to benefit, and I wanted the organization to benefit. He said, but I didn't realize how much I would learn and how much I would change in the process. And over again, we hear leaders say, it's exciting to be able to sit down with people and talk to them about what works well, and to learn and get good ideas, and to watch people come alive as we give them the opportunity to share. The third is that leaders care about people. Now again, this is nothing new for you. It's your business. It's what you do. But in a lot of arenas, you know, you experience leaders that seem to be more interested in the business or the profit or something like that. The leaders that choose Appreciative Inquiry truly care about people. Some of them have even said, you know, well, we do manufacturing, but that's really our reason for developing and helping people. And they put people first. And so it's very interesting to us that there's certain qualities of people who choose Appreciative Inquiry. And the last one is that they believe in the positive. They truly understand that affirmative images, that positive conversations help people learn and grow and move. So we had this in the background and we said, all right, let's do some research. And we decided not to go out and study all the important leaders that we all have known and we can quote. We decided to go do interviews and focus groups with people in a wide range of organizations. And the primary question was, what kind of leadership brings out your best and builds a high-performing organization? And so we asked that question over and over again. And the answer, positivity. We also, sometimes talk about it as positive power. This is not a good time to lose one's voice. Thank you. Positivity. And it came out in a number of different ways. Over and over again, people said, well, managers and leaders want us to have a can-do attitude. You know, we hear it all the time, have a positive attitude. But we want them to have a can-do attitude. We want our leaders to believe in us. We want our leaders to think it's possible, not to keep telling us what problems are. We want leaders who focus on what we do right. We want leaders who catch us doing things successful and show us that that works, because that's the way we can build a habit of success. If all they do is point out what doesn't work, we don't know how to be successful. We want leaders who recognize and appreciate us. We want people not just to say, oh, good job. We want them to tell us good job for what? Be specific. Again, people want to learn. They want to do good work. And they want to be seen as successful and valuable in your eyes. And so they want to hear from you. And then people want to do work that makes a positive difference. Again, that one you have covered. The work of hospice is so important, so significant. So that one, I think, is probably a big attractor for you. Now, we put all that together, and we've identified 5 strategies that we call relational strategies, because they're not about you. They're not like you are charismatic. They're about the way in which we interact, the way in which you interact with people, and you encourage other people to interact. And that's what I'm going to go through now. I'm going to take you through these 5 strategies, and along the way, talk a little bit about positive psychology and the strengths movement. The wisdom of inquiry. So let me tell you another story, just to illustrate the significance of the question. I was working in Calgary with the public health organization, And one of the directors came up to me and she said, I want to tell you about something I did. She said, I was invited to go out into the north to part of our region to give a talk. And I was opening up a conference on the services that we have for the community, healthcare services. And she said, I know I was going into a community where there was a lot of contention. And she said, I got there in the evening. I was picked up at the airport by an elder First Nations tribal leader. And as we're driving from the airport to my hotel, he's pointing out sights along the way. And I'm noticing that we're driving along a river. And he doesn't say anything about the river. So I say to him, tell me about the river that connects you. And he fairly quickly said, no. The river divides us. You meant to say the river that divides us. And he started to tell me about, who's on one side of the river, who's on the other side. And I said, no, I actually would like to hear, how does the river connect you? And he got very, very quiet. And he didn't say anything to me until he dropped me off at the hotel and he said, good night. And I walked into the venue where I was doing my talk the next morning, went in, and he came up to me. And he said, I was not the one scheduled to introduce you, but I'd like to introduce you. And my colleague said, well, I got a little nervous. I don't know what he was going to say. And he gets up in front of a room full of people like this, and he says, I have the good fortune to introduce one of the wisest women I have ever met. Last night, and he tells the story, and she asked me about the river that connected us. And I argued with her. And I said, oh no, the river is what divides us. But you see, she's right. We need to think about how the river connects us. We need to think about all the ways that we are connected, because that is the only thinking that will help us provide services for all of our children and all of our people. The question was provocative. It changed the way he thought. It changed what they were going to talk about at that conference. And so the power of one question to set the tone, to orient people's thinking, it's a very, very important practice. Now, what makes a good positive question? I teach 4-day workshops on this, so I'm going to give you one quick bit on it. The most important questions you can ask are questions about your values, what you want more of. Our habits are to ask questions about what we want less of. So in many organizations, people will say, well, we have so much turnover. We want less turnover. We need to study turnover. Why would you study turnover? Do you want to become an expert in turnover? No. What do you really want? What do you value? Retention. Some organization, a client of ours, even went on to study a magnetic work environment. That's what they wanted. A work environment that just attracted and held people with great enthusiasm. So a good, positive question is value-laden. It's what you want more of. And there's just a little example. You can take this and practice it when you go home. Think about our organization in the past few weeks or months and tell me about a time when, fill in the blank, when we were surprised by the collaboration and positive results we got. What made it happen? You see, great leaders collect stories, not just to put them on StoryCorps, but as a way of helping people make meaning out of their work life and learn. We learn from stories. Trust me, no list or memo that you have ever sent out, no matter how many hours you spent getting the right words, is as memorable as a story you've told. Stories convey meaning. And these kinds of questions get people telling stories and learning from each other. So you've got that as your homework. Another series of questions for homework. These are just here. I have a bit of a reputation among my students that I sort of don't use the word homework. I'll say, oh, I have a great opportunity for you. And so I have some considerations for you. But on the drive home, on the plane home, think about this. What about appreciative inquiry is really different from the habits of how you do things? And what are the most powerful value-based questions that you might ask to spark a positive revolution in your organization? And what one question, if it were answered, one positive question, would really help you grow your organization? So there's some questions for you as leaders. Think about, mull over, answer them, get people talking about them. Now, it's not just about the questions we ask. It's who we ask them with. Because if we talk to the same people all the time, we're going to hear the same thing. So appreciative leadership is also about inclusion. And I like to say inclusion on steroids. I mean, absolutely all the people whose future it is. All the people whose future it is in the room, in conversation. A colleague of mine says, don't talk about me without me. Again, you know that in your work. You would encourage family members to talk to their elders, to the ones who are making their last days and their transition. Do the same thing in your organizations. Bring all of the people together in conversation. Just a little story. I worked, again, a number of years ago. It's funny, my stories are all from Canada today. I worked with a healthcare organization, very successful in the clinical laboratory business. And so they were asking themselves, what are the new directions for our business? And we're back a number of years, and they were really going back and forth. Do we want to go into the nursing home business? We could buy properties, we could build facilities. Is that what we want to do? Or do we want to go into home health care? Strategically, where do we want to put a stake in the ground? We're having this meeting, and we're getting ready for strategic planning, and the executive team said, we can't answer that question alone. Who else should we have in the conversation? And so they all decided to get their spouses involved, to go home and have conversations with their spouses, with the staff members at all levels, with their parents, with community members about where do you want to spend your last days? Now that's a question that's an easy question for you. But for a group of business executives to say, we're going to go have these conversations before we create our business strategy. And you'll be happy to hear their decision was home health care. They decided that they would go into all kinds of equipment and services that would allow people to continue living in their own home and maintaining a quality of life. But it was the conversation that led them to make that choice of how they would invest their business strategy dollars. Another situation, let me go back, because this one I don't have a slide for. I was asked a number of years ago if I would come out to Idaho. The State Department of Education had found themselves in a bit of a pickle. One of the state Congress people had made a comment off the cuff. You know how carefully we have to be off the cuff, yet it got printed in the newspaper. And said, we should close that school for students who are deaf and blind. We should close that school because we could probably provide services in just as good a way and we can save a lot of money. Now, reading that in the paper by someone in authority, what did that do for the teachers and the faculty of that school? Sent them into a nervous worry. How about the parents whose kids were in that school? The people who had moved from one side of the state to the other state so they could get services for their children who are deaf and blind. It was 2 years later, and they could not quiet the rumor, because that's what it was, a rumor. There was no plan to close the school. There was no intention to close the school. There was no conversation about it, but they couldn't quiet it. So they said to me, could we bring a large number of community members together and let people have a conversation about the services that we want to provide for our students who are deaf and blind. And I said, well, sure. But when you say bring people together, who do you mean? So think about it. Who would have to be in the room for them to make a decision and everybody walk out feeling confident they had made a decision? Yes, you need all the people at the school, right? We need the faculty and the administrators. We need students, probably alumni. We need students who are deaf and students who are blind, which, by the way, meant it was the first time I ever worked with guide dogs in the room. We needed the legislators. We need the governor's office. We needed the Department of Education. We needed members of all the advocacy groups. You kind of get the picture of what I mean when I say everyone whose future it is. So we had 250 people in a room like this at tables, round tables of 8 people, and they all talked about their experiences, times when they had an experience learning and being with someone who was deaf and blind. And at the end of that meeting, there was a unanimous vote taken. I had not planned a vote into my agenda, but they decided they wanted to vote. And so they voted to keep the school open. With that kind of commitment, the plans that came out of the room were up. They were so elevated. The parent involvement was elevated. Everyone was very excited and committed now because they had a voice and they had a say in the services that were going to be provided from then on. And the recommendations that came out of that meeting went to the Board of Education, which went to the legislature, which were voted on and were budgeted and then were put in place. Because everyone who had to be in the discussion to make the decision was in the room. That's what we're talking about. Leadership that has the courage to convene meetings that brings all of the people whose future it is together. That's the power of inclusion. The third strategy that I want to talk a bit about today is the art of illumination. And you'll see at the bottom of the slide it says, what is your AQ? Do you know that you have an appreciative intelligence? There's a book written by 2 colleagues, Tojo Thatchenkari and Carol Metzer, called Appreciative Intelligence. And in sort of regular people language, appreciative intelligence is the ability to see the acorn before it grows into an oak tree. To see the potential in another person or another situation for growth, for development. To see the positive implicit possibility that is there to be grown. And appreciative leadership is about bringing out the best of other people. This is where appreciative inquiry intersects with the strength movement. Those of you who are familiar with the work of the Gallup organization will recognize this. They define strength as near perfect performance in an activity. Near perfect performance. And they say that when we are working in our strengths, it feels easy. And I was thinking, wow, do you think there's a strength called reading novels? You know, that feels easy. It increases our excellence and our success and our productivity. But here's the other bit. It's when we're in flow state. When we're using our strengths, we feel joy. We flow. We know those moments. We know what they are. But how often do we allow ourselves to really work from our strengths? This is the part that I like. Excellent performers are seldom well-rounded. How many of you here are well-rounded? I mean, except in places you don't want to be. Yeah, right, I can relate to that too. Okay, I know there are things that I can do and things I can't do. And so acknowledging that is really important. And they say that high performers capitalize on their strengths and minimize their weaknesses. And this bit is really important, that each person's greatest opportunity for growth is in the area of our strengths. And what they've shown in their research is if you spend time with children who are really good in reading and not so good in math, and you help them get better in reading, their math scores will improve, and vice versa. That if you help people do what they love better, they build the capacity to do other things. Now, that is pretty challenging to most of our habits. Because what do we do in most organizations? And if any of you are the HR people in your organizations, I am really sorry for my next comment. Right? What do we do in HR? We say, here are the competencies. Let's assess Diana and see which ones she does well and where she's not so good. And let's put together a development plan for the areas that she's not so good in. And then we wonder why Diana gets resistant and belligerent and doesn't do any better. Right? Because it's not her area of interest or strength. So the strength movement, and there are many, many books. I've got one here that you could start with, but there's so much research now that shows focus on strengths helps people grow and helps your organization thrive. Now, Peter Drucker sort of said it in his own words. The task of leadership is to create an alignment of strengths for a purpose or toward a goal in a way that weaknesses are irrelevant. All right? Any of you who coach anything, you know that. You know, I had a nephew who played baseball. He was a great pitcher. He had an arm. He could pitch. But you just don't put him in outfield because he couldn't throw that far. But he could throw fast that far. Right? So understanding people's strengths and playing them to their strength and aligning strengths is what works well. So how do you do that? Yeah, you can go get all these tests and assess people. Or you can become a strength spotter. And that's what we're going to do right now. You have a piece of paper that says 4 steps to strength spotting. Right? Y'all have this one? If not, you'll have the slides. I want you to select a partner, someone preferably that you don't know, but maybe you're just cozying up to somebody you know well, and that's okay today. But pick a partner. We like to talk about improbable pairs. And you're going to ask your partner to tell you a success story. I've got the questions on the next slide, and you have them on your piece of paper. What you're going to do is ask your partner to tell you that story. And you are going to probe. You're going to say, what did you do? You see, the interest that you have in this story is not about the story. It's not about the results. It's about what your partner did, how your partner approached the situation, how they thought about it, how they made relationships. You want to hear everything about what your partner did because your job is to listen and to hear the strengths that your partner brought to that particular success story. So you're going to ask all of these probing questions. What did you do? What else did you do? What gave you the idea to do this? Who else was involved and how did you get them in there? Okay? So, got a partner? Raise your partner's hand up in the air right now. Okay, everybody's got a partner? You're going to ask your partner the questions. You have 4 minutes for each person. 4 minutes each person, and I will tell you when it is time to change. Okay? Have fun with it. All right, it's about time to change roles. So finish up, make sure you tell your partner what you learned about their strengths, and then change roles. All right, 30 seconds to wrap up. Tell your partner what you learned about their strengths. Say thank you. How was that? Wonderful. Easy to do? Yeah? Yell out some more. Yeah? How can you imagine using it? With your team? With your family? With anybody? If you get into the habit of asking for stories, you'll be able to see people's strengths. You'll be able to recognize high performance patterns. If you ask them about problems, you will become the wizard of problems. And you will attract more problems. People bring you what you pay attention to. And so what you're now going to do is shift your habits. Start seeking stories of what works well, what gives joy, what brings people to life. And then that ties us into our fourth strategy, and that is inspiration. What we have found over years of working with many different organizations, that human change, whether it's personal or large scale, requires large amounts of positive emotions. And the research in positive psychology says people flourish in the presence of positive emotions. I talked about the unfolding of positive psychology. One of the people who got one of the very early largest grants, Barbara Fredrickson, was at the University of Michigan. She's now coincidentally at the University of Chapel Hill in North Carolina. One of her books, Positivity, is a great read. It's more of a popular book. It tells some of her life stories as well as her research. She began to do research into positive emotions. And the first thing she learned was what she calls the broaden and build theory. That the more positive the environment we are in, the more it broadens our curiosity and builds our capacity. Now we know that. We know fight, flight. If you put me in a scary situation, what happens? I tighten up. I'm not curious about what you think because I'm trying to protect my own ideas. But if I'm in a safe environment, I open up. I can be curious. I can learn. I can experiment. And so her first phase of research was this broaden and build. And then she went on and she said, I'm curious about what emotions correlate to what. And so she did another round of research in which she said there's certain things we want at work and in business: innovation, new knowledge, achievement, deeper insight, cooperation. She said, what emotions correlate with these kinds of things? And I think it's kind of interesting. If we want innovation, guess what? We get to play. We've got to have imagination and experimentation. Innovation lives on the edge. It's not the habit. So we've got to be playful. We've got to be creative. If we want achievement, I love it. Optimism. It's that can-do attitude. And so her research is very meaningful. It's empirical. It's quantitative research, and it shows us that this stuff that we've thought was the soft stuff is really what it's all about. And then she went on to do another round of research that really parallels with work that's being done by a number of people. And she said that people flourish. Isn't that a great word? People flourish. Organizations thrive. Organizations flourish in the presence of positive emotions and communication in the range of 4 positive to 1 negative. How many of you are here when Marshall Goldsmith spoke the other day? And he sort of did, oh my gosh, we're living in a world of about 6.5 negative to 1 positive. He said 65% of our conversation is criticism, negative, I want you to change. That's a 6.5 negative for every 1 positive. That's a sad state of affairs. When her research says, in order for people to thrive, they need to be in at least a 4 positive to 1 negative. There's research in teams out of Chile, and they're saying that it's a 5 to 1. Successful teams say 5 times more positive things about their team and to their team members than they do negative. John and Julie Gottman study families. The same thing, 5 to 1 ratio. So we say words create worlds. And the language and the emotional state of our workplace makes a difference. If you've got a workplace that is full of negative drama, it is taking everyone down. And you know that. We don't like being around the people who complain. And so it's really important to find ways to create that positive emotional environment. The choice is yours. Another story. An elder Native American man. The story is told that he's Cherokee. The story is told that he's Lakota. The story is told in a number of different ways. Decides that it's finally time to teach his young grandson about life and about being a fine young man. And so he says to his grandson, inside every one of us, there are two wolves, and they're fighting. One of them is a good wolf, and that wolf is loving and compassionate and generous and giving and helpful. But the other wolf is a bad wolf, and that wolf is greedy and mean and hurts people. And they're fighting inside of every one of us. And the grandson listens. And then he says to his grandfather, well, which one wins? And the grandfather said, the one that you feed. So we are always at that crossroads. Every choice that we make, every word that we utter is from that crossroads. Is it giving life? Is it energizing? Is it honoring and respectful? Or is it off the path that we really want to be on? And the final strategy is integrity. Now this one is an interesting one to me, because when you go to the dictionary and you start looking up the word integrity, it's connected to so many other wonderful words. Integral, integrated, whole, holism, complete, healthy, healed, holy, sacred. Leadership is a sacred act. And so what questions you ask, what stories you evoke, who you bring together and how you bring them together makes a difference, because we are all intimately interconnected. To be on the path of integrity is to be moving in the direction of your own wholeness and to be supporting others and moving them in that direction. I think one of my favorite quotes is from Martin Luther King. Make a career of humanity, and you will make a greater person of yourself, a greater nation of your country, and a finer world to live in. And so in summary, 5 strategies, and then I've got one right answer for you. Inquiry. Learn how to ask those provocatively positive questions. Just practice asking questions. Become a little impish in your mind. Include and invite improbable people. The people who may have a voice that's never been heard. Invite people into conversations, whether it's right in the office or host events. Become a strength spotter. Change your performance reviews from performance critiques to strength spotting. Really get in the habit and be curious. Whether you're sitting next to somebody on an airplane or it's somebody you're working with, tell them what you see is their habit of success. You'll be surprised. Work on that ratio of 5 positive to 1 negative. Remember, appreciative inquiry doesn't say we're always at our best. We need those times. We need those moments. We need the best friend to just, one of my friends like to say, have a good cup of coffee and judge earthlings harshly. You know, we kind of need that every once in a while. But make our habit 5 times more positive, and then make a career of humanity. And the secret to success is that no matter what the question, the answer is always love. Thank you very much. Don, thank you. I'm going back. You're good.
Thank you so much, Diana, and good morning, everybody. I hope you're all reasonably awake on our last day. You've given us a great deal to think about and to take back home to our home organization, so thank you very much. Diana will be signing copies of her books right after this in the marketplace. And so again, good morning. I'm Don Schumacher, and I want to thank all of you for being part of this year's MLC. Did you have a good time? Great. I always love the content, but I love the content this year. Marshall was great. Dr. Gawande was fabulous. And then we had the business aspects of MedPAC yesterday, which I thought was incredibly important. And Diana's thinking this morning about being positive in the midst of all of this stuff we're dealing with was very, very helpful. When in Marketplace, be sure to look over the merchandise that is part of the inventory reduction sale. I know you've been doing some great shopping, and so thank you while you've been here, and there's still quite a few hours left, so please stop by. We also have a special promotion we're offering this morning. For $20, you can fill a blue conference bag with as much of our sale merchandise as you can fit. There are still 2 sets of concurrent sessions today. Be sure to take advantage of these sessions and get there. And let me take the opportunity to thank every MLC faculty member and presenter for sharing your skills and expertise with us this week. I also would like to encourage all of you who have ideas for concurrent sessions to consider submitting a session proposal when the call for proposals for MLC goes out for 2013. You can expect the call to be open in the fall of this year, so please keep your eyes open on news briefs for information when it's available. Your content support is great for us. A couple of other important dates I want to share. Our Volunteer Leadership Virtual Conference is this summer, July 30th to August the 3rd. It's all happening online, and you can register by location. It even includes a one-day especially designed for your volunteers. You won't want to miss this. And NHPCO's 13 Clinical Team Conference and Pediatric Intensive, It's About How You Care, will be held in Orlando, Florida at the Walt Disney World Dolphin Resort November 5th through 7th of this year, with the pre-conference session scheduled for November 3rd and 4th. I hope you'll consider sending some of your members of your clinical team to that, and I hope that you'll be considering joining us as well. Next year's MLC will be right back here at the Gaylord, but a bit later in the year. Next year, the MLC will be April 25th through 27th, 2013, with pre-cons on the 23rd and 24th, and of course the NHF Gala on the 26th. Hosting a conference like this is a lot of work. It's quite a task, and I'd like to thank all of the NHPCO staff that work tirelessly to make these conferences to come together. Oh, thank you. We love our staff. Thank you for that round of applause. Our appreciation all goes out to our conference supporters and our special guests. And so on behalf of NHPCO, the Board of Directors, and the staff, thank you for being part of this and the Management Leadership Conference. Enjoy the rest of the conference, and I hope you had as great time as I did. And please, all of you, travel safely home. See you soon. Thanks.